Good evening. Welcome to this month's Town Administrators Report. I'm David Watts Jr., and with me is our Town Administrator, Steve Mayo. Steve, welcome.
David, thank you for having me here. Always exciting to have our Town Administrators Report. I do want to just let you know and the listeners, the viewers know, I guess, that because I have been in contact with a couple of members of my team that have come down with COVID, I am wearing a mask, although I was tested and I'm negative, following the CDC guidance, indoors, remain masked for a period of, I think it's 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm following the guidance to keep myself safe and everybody else safe. So that's why I'm masked today.
And we
So I'm
appreciate
hoping people
that.
can hear me. I've never been accused of not being heard before. So
Including at town meeting.
including a town meeting.
That's
I've been
right.
told I talk too fast, but never not too soft, so I will slow it down.
It's always kind of a rivalry between you and Bill as to who is here heard better.
Well, there's no rivalry. It's him, hands down. So
Also joining us this month is Glavia Smith. Glavia is the Metco director here in the Wakefield Public School System. Welcome, Glavia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And let's start off. Metco is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. How did it come about?
Yes, so Metco is a 503 organization. So Metco was started in the 60s by Ruth Batson, a woman that was had children at Boston Public School, in which they felt that Boston Public School was not providing equal opportunity for their students. So they decided to rally together with herself and some other community members to advocate for students of color to be able to get the same opportunity as white students, which is how Metco started its very beginnings. It's a desegregation program.
Okay, but it's not a desegregation program in the way that Boston was forced to desegregate in the 70s.
Right.
But it's more using the suburbs to help out.
Right. So the premise is students from Boston area, urban area schools would then be bused into suburban school departments. So the main purpose is to, one, have those students have a great opportunity to get a good education. Two, to also to provide some diversity into some of those suburban schools that typically does not have any diversity on them. So the hope is that those suburban schools would desegregate at some level, mm-hmm. because they will have some diversity in their schools, in the student body, in their community at the same time.
And this has been around now for it's been active for 52 years.
Yes.
It was organized 55 years ago in the middle of the civil rights movement of the 1960s.
Yes.
If I remember right. How many communities, including Wakefield, participate in the Boston program?
So currently we have about 33 communities
Mm-hmm.
that are involved
Mm-hmm.
across the state of Massachusetts that have current students that live in Boston attending school in the suburban areas.
And how many do we have attending Wakefield schools?
Currently this year we have 64 students that is spread out across the school district.
So elementary, middle school, and high school?
Yes.
Because I think originally it was only the high school.
Yes, so right now we have about 26 students at the high school. That's ninth grade to 12th grade, about 25 at the middle school, and then the elementary school splits about between 17 and 18 in the elementary school.
And the kids who are in the high school, did they start in the elementary schools? Have they gone through the whole program, or did they come into the program somewhere along the way?
So it depends. So some students, you will find a majority of the kids do start in the kindergarten
Mm-hmm.
program. So we do have kids that start in kindergarten and they remain in the program until 12th grade. So which means they only know Wakefield as their home school.
Mm-hmm.
So their entire educational background is in Wakefield. And you have kids that start maybe in the 3rd grade, 4th grade. So it all depends what grade level they start in. And we also have very rarely we have students that start in the 9th grade. But for the most part, a majority of the kids would be kids that are starting from somewhere in the elementary grades,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as they then progress into high schoolers.
And I know it's hard to gauge things like this, but how successful has the program been over the 52 years?
So a little story background about me. I'm a Metco alum. I went to Dover Sherman Regional High School. I started there in the 9th grade, and my brother was also is also an alum from Dover Sherman, and he started in the 9th grade. So I would say the program is successful, but I can't speak for every student. It all depends on their experience of how they feel in the community and also how their parents are engaged in the program because attending an all-white school can be very intimidating, can be very what's the word? Very frightening at times, especially if you're younger. But then when you think at the age I started in 9th grade, which is very it's not a familiar ground because you've been going to urban schools your whole life, and then now you go to a predominantly white school. So I think everybody have their own story and their own definition of what success is for them in regards to if they were Metco student. I can speak for me, it was a success. I loved it. I love my experience there. I would not change anything about my experience. But I do know that I do have some students that although they're in the program, they're still struggling. They're still struggling to make the experience a great experience for them. And it could be because they've had different things happen to them in the district with other students or with staff that's not making the experience great. And then you can speak to other students that say they had an amazing experience. So it all depends on how everyone sees themselves within the Metco program and how they define their role in it.
I have three of my boys I have three boys, they all went to Wakefield Public Schools, and they all had great experiences with a lot of students, including Metco students. And I think it'd be great for some of our viewers to know, what is their day like, a typical Metco student day? It is a commitment. It's
is.
You're not rolling out of bed and rolling down the
Nope,
hill
you're not.
at 7:15 and make it to class. So I think that if you could explain that a little bit.
So I will start. So as the school year is beginning, we're already starting to put together the bus schedules. So because Wakefield High School started a different time than elementary and middle school, we run 2 buses. So the first pickup on the high school bus is at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
So they're up probably about 5:15, 5:30, if anything, the latest.
For an 8 o'clock start?
High school's for a 7:20 start.
Okay.
So they are up, the first bus starts running at 6 a.m. And it does the last pickup in the south end, which is Albany Street, which is right before the highway, if you know Boston. And that last stop is at 6:45 or 6:40.
So these young people, I think it's good for the people at home to hear this. They are getting up at 5 in the morning
Right.
to make sure they make the bus and get to school.
Right.
Okay.
And for the most part, we are having, 100% attendance
Yeah.
rate. They're getting up every morning. They're coming in. The morning's a little hard, but by 10, 11 o'clock, they're fully awake by then. So homeroom's a little tough. And then, first 2 classes, they're a little sluggish.
Yeah.
But by 10 o'clock, they're good. They're ready to go. And a lot of our students, in addition to getting up that early, a lot of them are also athletes. So a lot of them
Right.
participate in a lot of the athletic program in the high school. So if a student is, let's say hypothetically, a football player, right? And practice is for 2 hours after school. So school is over at 2:05. Practice starts maybe at 3 o'clock, if that. So then practice then goes until 5 or maybe
Right.
6. So we're talking about then there's an additional 30, 40-minute ride home after that. So a lot of our kids are not getting home probably until settled in home dinner 9, 10 o'clock.
Right.
So they're eating, and that's not including homework time
Right.
to do
Right.
homework. And then they're going to bed and do it all over again in the morning. So and then as athletes, they also have weekend games. So in addition to being very tired from the Monday through Friday of traveling, they still are committed to their sports and any other activities that they are involved in within the district. So some of them are very implanted in the district. So they're doing sports, they're doing music, or
Right.
they just have friends out here. So it can be a very long day. And then when you think about our little ones, like kindergartners,
Right.
so we have kindergartners that also makes the ride, and their day starts at 6:10. So we have these little 5, 6 year olds there on the bus, 6:10 in the morning, and they get here by 7ish, so that the middle school kids can get to school, and then we start dropping at the elementary school. So they're up pretty early. Their day can be long. The ride could be long because they're not leaving the district until 3:30, 3:45. So imagine the traffic over the Tobin to go over the Tobin Bridge and back. So it's a pretty long, taxing day on them. So we ask teachers and staff to have some grace with them, to be understanding that, if they're a little tired, just be gentle and see,
Right.
check in with them, see what's going on,
Sure.
see if it's just tired or they just have, it's just one of those days. Because sometimes they are tired, but they're very attentive, and if it's a pattern of them always falling asleep in class, I think that's a different conversation. But it's not too far-fetched that the kids, they're just tired.
Right, and I think we really should marvel at them. The commitment of these young kids is just amazing to me, to have that commitment. And you mentioned the kids that are in sports or music or student government or what have you.
Right.
They have a Friday night football game, and maybe they're younger, they're a freshman or a sophomore.
Right.
They're thrilled to be dressing and standing on the sideline of the football game. Well, that gets over at 9 o'clock. Now, they're either going home late on Friday night, which would be, most kids, oh, great, I'm going home late on Friday night, it's Friday night, I can sleep in tomorrow. Nay, because maybe they have a freshman or a sophomore football game the next morning at 8 sometimes. So they're either
Right.
coming right back, or, they're, staying over with some of the kids in the area, which friendships develop, and so
Right.
I know it's quite a commitment.
It is.
And to keep that, so I think it's fabulous. And, Wakefield's been part of this since 1969. So I am thrilled and so proud that we were, not the first ones in, but
Right.
a couple of years later, we jumped in. So I think it says a lot about the town that we've done that.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, there was at least one Metco student in my high school class, which is 72, so that would have been someone probably the last 3 years of high school
Yep.
here in Wakefield, as opposed to the whole system.
Yeah.
If I get this right from the town website, it's just you and Angela Driggers who run the program here in the
Right.
school system?
So that's not up to date, but I haven't had a chance to update it. So it's myself, the Metco director. So I oversee the program in general
Yeah.
across the district. In January, during the pandemic, we hired Mr. Dwayne Clasher, who is the middle school academic coordinator, and he does everything middle school over there. Ms. Driggers serves many purposes. She is a parent of students in the program. She's
Yep.
also a grandparent of students in the program. She works in the district as a paraprofessional, and she's also our bus monitor for the middle school and elementary bus. So she wears several hats, and she does it really well. And she's also kind of like my little right-hand person
Yeah.
for anything else that we want to do in regards to programming, events, and stuff like that.
And I'm trying to kind of formulate, well, let's go on to a different area of it. In addition to Boston, Springfield also has a Metco
Yes.
program. And their students are bused to communities in that area,
Right.
much smaller program.
Right. So I'm
apparently.
not too familiar with the Springfield program, but and I don't think we really connected with them out there. At least I can say for me. I can't say for everyone else, but I believe Springfield do have a program, so they must have a shorter distance of drive to kids in to the schools around their neighborhood.
Yeah, I believe they
Yeah.
have only 4 participating communities.
Yeah.
As opposed to the 33 here.
Right.
You know, I think we said at the outset, or maybe we were talking before the show, it started out as fully funded by the state. Now it's fully funded by the federal government.
Yep.
At what point did the federal government decide to take over Metco, and does that mean they have spread the program out beyond the Boston area into a national program?
I don't believe it's I think I'm hearing that other states are taking it on. I want to say either New York or Maryland might be considering that. But I'm not sure of the date of when we switch over from state funding to federal funding. So a lot of our guidance comes from Department of Education, Secondary Education. So we go through that. So every year we do request funding from the state to fund our individual programs. And depending how big your district is, it really depends on how much you get in funding, depending on how big your district is.
Now, does that come in as part of the cherry sheet, or
I-
how
I-
does that come in?
I believe that comes in separately to the school department. It's not directly on what I would consider the cherry sheet.
Yeah,
But I think that's a very important point, is that not only do we benefit greatly from having diversity in our schools and having some different views, people in here, and I think that is well worth any payment we would make for it. But the money essentially follows the kids in here. And so there really isn't some people say, well, this costs us money. No, it doesn't cost us money, and we gain so much more out of it. So I think that's important, but I think that's direct to the school department.
right.
Yeah.
But I think it's also that the kids themselves gain a lot from having this mixture of the local kids and the Metco kids being able to kind of talk about each other's experiences,
Absolutely.
you know?
Right. I think the experiences can be, if you ask some of our Metco kids, more of the high school and middle school kids, I think you'll get a mixed bag. Some kids have really good experience and have really close relationship within the district. They make friends and they hang out in the district. And then you have other kids where, they come here, but that's about all. They don't really have any vested relationships in the district. And part of it is maybe because their parents think it's the best choice for them. So they're here and they just kind of plugging away to do what they have to do and finish up. But I think the ultimate goal is to enrich the lives of both students, with the Boston students and then also the Wakefield students. If you ask any of the Boston students, they don't like being called Boston students. They don't like being
The
referred.
Wakefield students.
Right. They don't want to be called the Metco students. They don't want to be called the Boston students. They don't want to be told you're going to get on the Metco bus or the Boston bus. They're Wakefield students at the end of the day. At the end of the day, this is some of them, if they started school here in kindergarten, this is the only district they've known. So to them, they are Wakefield students.
Right.
So
Their diploma is Wakefield High School.
Right. Their diploma is
Period.
Wakefield
Yeah.
High School. Doesn't say Metco student
No.
on it. We don't even write anything Metco on it.
Yep.
So I think it's important that when anyone refers to our students, that we say, the Wakefield student by this name, not this Metco student, because it sets this tone of you're different than us.
Right.
Which
Which is exactly what the program's
Right.
trying to avoid.
Right. It sets the tone for you're different. You're not from here, and you're already you're already isolating them, right? So a lot of the students they get really upset when they're considered people are calling them Metco student or anything like that, or they get upset when people automatically assume because they are students of color they belong in the Metco program. So
Correct.
that happens a
Yeah,
lot.
that
also.
happens a lot, yes.
And
Which is equally wrong-headed.
right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've had staff come to me and say, hey, do you know this student? I'm like, no, I don't. And they like, I thought they're in the Metco program. I'm like, why would you think they're in the Metco program? She's like, well, I'm like, no, I don't know. Why would you
No.
think they're in the Metco program? Is it because they're Spanish, they're of color, they're part of the BIPOC community? No. And the teacher's like, are you sure? I'm like, I said, I think I would know who I have on my roster. I know names of every student in all 64 of my students. You say the name, I'm like, yep, I know who that is. So it's people have to be very careful on how these little minute things
Right.
make a difference
How they phrase things.
how you phrase it. Taking time to learn their names and say their names right. These little minute things that people consider not that serious really dictate their experience in the district.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it makes a long-term difference too
Right.
in how they see things.
Right, and how they see themselves as part of Wakefield community.
You know, a few years ago, and it's been, hasn't happened, you know, obviously in the last couple of years because of the pandemic, but there was something sponsored, International Night. At the, and I loved that event because the food is great. Full disclosure, the food is great. That's why I like to go.
The range of
Absolutely.
food is
The
great.
range, I don't really,
Yeah,
let me say, I'm not,
absolutely.
but it's very interesting as well. Things getting better, we hope. Maybe we're not having a good time now. Is that something is being talked about, maybe being brought back at some point?
So it's funny you
'Cause-
say that because right when the pandemic hit, we had a date
Yeah.
for International Night.
Yes.
Pandemic hit, and then it was like, okay, let's wait to see if we get to go back. And
Right.
Then it was like, nope, school is closed indefinitely for now. So we're like, well, I guess no International
Right.
Night. So I think where, you know, I have to say for me, I have some adverse reaction when I hear International Nights because I feel like it becomes this display stuff going on. So I don't think it's off the table. I think it's a conversation to have with all our 3 Metco staff around how can we do an event that is inclusive of all, not just the Metco kids, but also open up to the Wakefield the larger Wakefield community, that we can encompass all cultures within the Wakefield community and not just a focus on us hosting this event. So I'm hoping this year, if all goes well, we stay in person and we're able to continue to gather in a group of some sort, that we're able to at least bring back an event that does bring the larger community together.
I think that's great, and you get my full support.
Right.
Maybe I'll even cook something.
That would be great.
And
It's on tape, so people will
I
know,
can't
right?
tell you I'm going to do that. I don't consider myself a great chef, so I can't promise you I'll do that.
And I think, Glavia, that you're raising a very important point, because there are some voices in the community that say, we are this,
Right.
and completely miss the fact that Wakefield over the last half century itself has changed and broadened, and it's not the community that you and I grew up in,
Right.
you know, back in the 50s and the 60s. And I think that's an important distinction, and that in itself should be celebrated, that there is so much more to the town today, you know, than some are willing to acknowledge.
No, I agree, and I do think in the last few international nights there was a mix. It probably wasn't promoted as well, and that's on us all. But I think that it's a pretty great. Again, I'm willing to jump in.
I'll
Okay?
remember that. When
Remember
we're
that.
playing it.
Yes.
I'll remember that.
She's running it down right
okay.
now,
I'm like,
you know?
I'll challenge
I'm
the
gonna-
superintendent to a cook-off. All right.
I'll let Doug know. I'll let Mr.
Okay,
Lyons
after the
know.
show, I'll give you his private number. But you know, and I think that's the important distinction is
Absolutely.
that we recognize the fact that there is much more to this community. Metco is an important part of it, but it isn't the whole story, you know. And hopefully that'll change more. Hopefully that'll change
And I
more.
think we're seeing, so this is my 3rd year in the district. So I would say, you know, baby steps. I think we're seeing little changes. I think we're seeing a community that is attempting to rally behind our Metco program in our kids, and that is refreshing for our kids, I think. To see anyone who comes out to support them in any type of way. So I think slowly and surely the community is coming out to support.
Yeah.
Like last year we did a lot of sponsoring and work with the Human Rights Commission in
Yes.
the town.
I used to be on that, yes.
So we've been connected to them, and the kids were brave enough to start a Black Student Union that has been going at least 2 years now at the high school. So they try to do a lot of racial justice stuff, or they just try to be a space where they can gather, and we welcome all to that club at the high school. So I think the community is slowly nudging. So I think there's more work to do, but I think the more we keep the dialogue going, the more visible we are, I think the community eventually will kind of be a little bit more embracive, and more people will come along. And I think it's through programs such as examples like International Night. If you open it to the whole community, it's when you will then have this collaboration of these two towns. And right now, one of the project we're trying to work on is what you call a partnership collaboration between Wakefield families and Boston families, where families in Wakefield are willing to be partners with with other families that have kids, whether in their schools or not, where they can either be host family, they could be a resource to them, or they could just be someone where if the child needs a ride home, then you're available, you can do that, or the
Right.
child is waiting for, like, school is out at 12 o'clock and practice is not till 4 because it's early dismissal, that that you would be open to allow the child in your home to wait, and if they need to do homework and do what they have to do in order to go into practice.
Right.
So just looking for anyone in the community who's interested in that, and then to have meet and greet with our families so that we can bridge the gap of the two towns together.
But you know, and that would be the ideal solution.
Right.
And hopefully that will come. But going back to the kids and how they participate, and we've talked about this on the show before, probably the best example was last year, the students who organized that march and rally for racial justice,
Right.
April of last year.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
how well that went off,
Oh.
how beautifully it was done, how meaningful it was in the speeches and the gathering, and just a testament. And it wasn't any town group that did it, it was those three kids who
Right.
just said, we
Right.
need to do this, and they brought it together.
Right.
And it just went off beautifully.
Right. And they did a spectacular, and
Oh.
that was led by them. That was proposed, executed, and assembled by them. It was, Rainier Grant, Faith DeFenere, and I think the one other girl's name is Sarah. I don't remember her last name, but they did a beautiful job. And part of it's because they felt like they needed to do something,
Right.
because they are Wakefield. They are part of Wakefield, and they felt like they had a personal reason, a personal
State. Yeah.
stake in the game
Yeah.
to do something. So it
Yeah.
was really nice.
And the great thing was how many townspeople responded.
Right.
A lot of familiar faces in the crowd, who were also participating and saying, this is what we need to do.
It was a day that I think we were all very proud of. Proud of the townspeople that did turn out, and in awe of these young women who pulled this off flawlessly.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, it was an incredible experience. It really was.
I do have a question. I know we're finishing up. Kind of looked at, what other communities around us are doing, because that's kind of what I look at. Does the Metco program want more communities? Because some of our neighbors are not involved in the program. And if they do, if the Metco program does, and maybe it's not an unfair question for you, how can we support that? Because more kids could take
Right.
advantage of this in both communities.
Right. So we have close neighbors that participate. So Melrose is
Melrose
one.
and
Linfield.
Linfield,
Yeah.
Reading,
Reading, yeah,
Swampscott,
yeah,
and Bedford.
yeah.
So any surrounding towns that are interested, I would definitely recommend that you reach out to Metco Inc. headquarters, to the CEO. Director is Millie Bray. Ooh, I'm skipping on her last name. But you could Google Metco Inc.
Yeah.
and it'll come up, and you can contact her to start the process, because I imagine it's not an easy process. So I'm assuming you have to get recognized at some level so that you can become part of the funding process, and then it's a matter of recruitment to get students.
Right.
So I don't imagine it's an easy process, but anyone who's interested can reach out to Metco Inc. to check in with the CEO of Metco, and she would be able to help them with that process.
Okay.
And if there are any townspeople who would like to help out with the kids, they can just contact you?
Yes, they can email me. My name and email address is on the Wakefield Public School, but for the purpose of that is Glavia, glavia.smith@wpsk12.org.
Glavia, thank you very much.
you.
Thanks for having me.
Steve, we'll be back again
We
next
will,
month.
and Glavia, whatever we can do on the municipal side, please ask us.
Sure,
Because we
thank
want to
you.
help out.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep. And I hope to be back here maskless next time.
Next month. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.